The champagne bubbled against my lips as I watched my wife Erica slip through the French doors onto the garden terrace. Her phone screen glowed in the twilight, Nathan Wallace's name bright as a neon sign. She pressed the device to her ear with the practiced urgency of someone who'd done this dance before. 7 times. This marked the 7th family event she'd interrupted for her indispensable boss at MedTech Solutions. I'd stopped counting after Christmas dinner, but my brain kept the tally anyway. That's what 20 years in hospital operations management does to you. You document everything, even when you wish you couldn't. Your wife sure is dedicated, my brother Peter said, adjusting his bow tie. The groom looked every inch the successful attorney, all polish and practiced charm. Running that hospital partnership can't be easy. I nodded, watching Erica pace the stone pathway between Mom's rose bushes. Her free hand gestured animatedly as she spoke. From this distance, she looked like she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. She's something else, I agreed, taking another sip. The champagne tasted like expensive regret. Peter's new wife Amanda floated over in her designer gown, all smiles and wedding day radiance. David, you should be so proud. Erica was just telling everyone about the new surgical wing project. She's practically running that place single-handedly. Practically, I echoed, my voice steady as concrete. The truth sat in my jacket pocket like a loaded weapon, a secure digital drive containing 3 months of evidence. Text messages that would make a sailor blush. Hotel receipts from places we'd never been together. Credit card charges for dinners I'd never tasted, gifts I'd never received, all documented with the methodical precision that had made me indispensable in my old job, back when I still believed loyalty mattered. I'd spent countless evenings this spring playing digital detective while Erica worked her late meetings. Every screenshot saved, every timeline verified, every lie cataloged with timestamps and GPS coordinates. The modern age made cheating easier, but it also made the evidence ironclad. Through the glass doors, I watched Erica laugh at something Nathan said. Her whole body language transformed when she talked to him, shoulders relaxed, head tilted, in that flirtatious way I remembered from our college days. She touched her neck, twirled a strand of hair around her finger. Classic tells that any fool could read, if they bothered to look. I should probably rescue her from work, I said, setting down my glass. You know how these hospital emergencies can spiral. Amanda beamed. You're such a supportive husband. She's lucky to have someone who understands her career demands. Lucky? Right. I stepped onto the terrace, my dress shoes clicking against the flagstones. Erica stood near the garden fountain, her back to me, voice low and intimate. The evening air carried fragments of her conversation. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, she was saying. The conference hotel has that amazing spa conference. The quarterly MedTech retreat she'd mentioned last week. Funny how she'd never invited me to any of these industry gatherings, not even as her +1. Too boring for civilians, she'd explained. Too much shop talk. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled to a number I'd memorized but never called. The MedTech Solutions HR hotline, available 24 hours for confidential reporting of policy violations. Their website made it clear that romantic relationships between supervisors and direct reports required immediate disclosure and careful management to avoid conflicts of interest. Erica had never mentioned filing any such disclosure. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. MedTech Solutions Ethics Hotline. This is Jennifer. How can I help you? I need to report a policy violation, I said, keeping my voice low and matter of fact. Undisclosed romantic relationship between a supervisor and subordinate. I have documentation. I see. Can you provide the names of the individuals involved? Nathan Wallace, Director of Strategic Partnerships, and Erica Thompson, Senior Administrative Coordinator for the Hospital Integration Project. And your relationship to the parties involved. I watched my wife of 22 years laugh at something her lover said, completely oblivious to my presence 20 feet away. I'm Erica's husband. The silence stretched for several seconds. Professional sympathy, carefully measured. I understand this must be difficult, Mr. Thompson. Do you have documentation to support this report? Comprehensive documentation, text messages, financial records, travel itineraries, 3 months of evidence showing a clear pattern of inappropriate conduct and potential misuse of company resources. Can you send those materials to our secure reporting system tonight? Already prepared. I'll need about 10 minutes to upload everything through your encrypted portal. We'll begin our investigation first thing Monday morning. Per company policy, both parties will be placed on administrative leave pending review. Given the seriousness of these allegations and the documentation you've described, this matter will be escalated to senior leadership immediately. Understood. What happens next? We'll conduct interviews with both parties and review all evidence. If the violations are confirmed, disciplinary action up to and including termination may be imposed. The company takes these matters very seriously, especially when they involve potential misuse of resources or breach of fiduciary duty. 11 minutes. The entire conversation lasted 11 minutes, during which I watched Erica touch her collarbone and bite her lower lip, the same gestures she'd once reserved for me. By the time I ended the call, she was already heading back toward the reception, phone tucked away, expression shifting to practiced innocence. I opened my laptop's secure portal and began uploading files. Screenshots of text conversations dating back to March, credit card statements showing charges for romantic dinners, weekend getaways, expensive gifts, hotel reservations made with company accounts for conferences that didn't exist, email threads discussing project budgets with suspicious line items that corresponded to their rendezvous. The upload completed as the band started playing inside. I closed the laptop and slipped it back into my car, then returned to the reception just as Erica emerged from the ladies' room, lipstick refreshed, smile perfectly calibrated. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding her arm through mine. "Nathan needed to discuss the budget projections for next week's presentation. You know how he gets about the quarterly numbers." "Of course," I said, kissing her cheek. "Always something urgent with him. He's incredibly dedicated. Sometimes I think he cares more about this project than anyone else in the company." She squeezed my arm. "But enough shop talk. This is Peter's night." We rejoined the celebration, dancing to songs that had played at our own wedding decades ago. Erica moved in my arms like nothing had changed, chatting with relatives, complimenting the flowers, playing the role of devoted wife with Academy Award precision. I smiled back at everyone, made small talk about the weather and the beautiful ceremony, complimented Amanda's dress and the excellent catering. Inside, I felt like a man watching his house burn down from the inside out, knowing the fire department was already on the way. The evening wound down with sparklers and champagne toasts. Erica laughed at Peter's best man speech, wiped away a tear during Amanda's thank you to the family, and held my hand during the final dance. We drove home in comfortable silence, her head resting against the passenger window, probably thinking about tomorrow's conference with Nathan. "Beautiful wedding," she murmured as we pulled into our driveway on Granite Street. "Perfect," I agreed. Sunday passed in manufactured normalcy. We read the newspaper over coffee, attended the farmer's market downtown, had dinner with her parents. Erica packed for her conference trip, carefully folding lingerie I'd never seen before into her travel bag. She kissed me goodbye Sunday evening, promising to call when she arrived at the hotel. She did call, right on schedule, describing the beautiful lobby and her comfortable room. She mentioned how tired she was from the drive, how early her first session started Monday morning. She said she loved me before hanging up. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in our corner of New England. I made coffee for one and watched the local news, waiting. At 7:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Erica. "Heading into meetings. Long day ahead. Love you." At 9:30, my phone rang. Erica's name on the caller ID, but her voice was nothing like the confident professional I'd married. "David?" She sounded confused, almost childlike. "Something's wrong. Security met me at the elevator. They said my badge was deactivated. HR wants to see me immediately." "That's strange," I said, stirring sugar into my second cup of coffee. "Did they say why?" "Something about policy violations, an anonymous complaint. They won't tell me anything else." Her voice cracked. "I don't understand what's happening." "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. You haven't done anything wrong, have you?" "Of course not. I've been completely professional. This has to be some kind of mistake, or maybe—" Her voice turned sharp with sudden realization. "Maybe someone's trying to sabotage the project. There's been so much politics around the hospital integration." "That could be it," I agreed. "Office politics can get pretty ugly." "I have to go. They're calling me into the conference room." She paused. "David? This is going to be okay, right? They can't just fire someone without cause." "Everything will work out," I assured her. "Just tell them the truth." The line went quiet. 2 hours later, she called again, sobbing. "They fired me," she said between gasps. "Terminated immediately. They said I violated company policy regarding workplace relationships and misused corporate resources. They had evidence, David. Screenshots and receipts, and how did they get all of that?" "Evidence of what?" "They said I was having an inappropriate relationship with Nathan. They had our text messages, pictures of us at restaurants, hotel records. Someone's been watching us, documenting everything." Her voice rose to near hysteria. "This is insane. Yes, Nathan and I have become close, but it's not what they're making it sound like." "Close. Even caught red-handed, she couldn't quite bring herself to use the word affair. What did Nathan say? He's been fired too, escorted out this morning before I even got there. David, I don't know what to do. They're saying I might have to pay back money for unauthorized expenses. They mentioned legal action. I let her cry for a moment, listening to 22 years of marriage dissolve into broken sobs and desperate breathing. Come home, I finally said. We'll figure this out together. She arrived 3 hours later, still in the professional outfit she'd chosen for her first day of conference meetings with her lover. Her makeup was streaked, her hair disheveled, her hands shaking as she tried to unlock the front door. I opened it for her, and she collapsed into my arms like a broken bird. Someone's been stalking us, she said, her words muffled against my shoulder. Taking pictures, recording conversations, this has to be illegal. We can sue them for invasion of privacy. I held her while she cried, stroking her hair the way I had during her father's funeral, during her miscarriages, during all the genuine crises of our shared life. This time felt different. This time, I was the storm instead of the shelter. Who would do something like this? She asked, pulling back to look at my face. Who hates me enough to destroy my career? I considered the question seriously. Maybe someone from the hospital? You said there was resistance to the integration project. It has to be. Maybe Dr. Richardson. He's been against the partnership from the beginning, or that witch Melanie from HR. She's always resented my position. Erica's voice gained strength as she built her conspiracy theory. This whole thing smells like office politics. They wanted me gone, so they manufactured this scandal. That's possible, I agreed. But honey, you have to admit, your relationship with Nathan was getting pretty intense. Even if it was innocent, it might have looked inappropriate to outsiders. Her expression shifted, defensive walls snapping into place. Nathan and I are colleagues. Yes, we've become friends, but there's nothing inappropriate about our relationship. We work closely together on a high-pressure project. Of course, we talk frequently. Friends. Now we downgraded from close to friends. The revisionist history was already beginning. The evidence they showed me was taken completely out of context, she continued. Text messages can sound different when you're looking for something sinister. Dinners can look suspicious if you don't understand the business context. What about the hotel charges? She hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to catch the lie forming behind her eyes. Conference expenses. Sometimes we had to stay overnight for early morning meetings. Completely legitimate business travel. I nodded sympathetically. Of course, but you can see how someone might misinterpret that, especially if they were looking to cause trouble. Exactly. She seized on my understanding like a lifeline. This is all about perception and politics. Someone wanted to destroy the project, so they targeted the key personnel. It's character assassination, plain and simple. We spent the rest of the afternoon constructing her defense. She called her lawyer, her mentor from graduate school, her network of professional contacts. Everyone was appropriately outraged by the injustice, appropriately supportive of her innocence, appropriately confident that the truth would eventually prevail. I made dinner while she worked the phones, listening to her tell the same story over and over with increasing conviction. By evening, she'd almost convinced herself that she was the victim of an elaborate corporate conspiracy. I've been thinking, she said over takeout Chinese food, maybe we should hire a private investigator, find out who's been following us, how they got access to my personal information. This kind of surveillance has to be illegal. That's an interesting idea, I said, opening my fortune cookie, though it might be expensive. My career is worth it. 20 years of building my reputation, and they destroy it with manufactured evidence and innuendo. She stabbed her chopsticks into the lo mein with unnecessary force. I won't let them get away with this. I read my fortune aloud. Patience is the companion of wisdom. What's yours say? I asked. She cracked open her cookie and frowned. Your past actions determine your current situation. Huh, pretty philosophical for a fortune cookie. She crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. Stupid random nonsense. After dinner, she retreated to her home office to research employment lawyers and wrongful termination cases. I cleaned the kitchen and settled into my recliner with a beer, listening to her make increasingly frantic phone calls upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, she came downstairs looking defeated. The lawyers all say the same thing, she reported. If the company has documented evidence of policy violations, termination is probably legal. Even if the relationship was innocent, failure to disclose it was a breach of employment terms. I'm sorry, I said. That must be frustrating. They're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal, like I embezzled money or committed fraud. She slumped onto the couch beside me. Nathan and I were just friends who worked well together. Is that so terrible? Just friends. We'd now downgraded twice in the same day. Of course not, I assured her. But maybe, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, maybe the relationship looked different from the outside than it felt from the inside. Her eyes flashed with anger. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing accusatory. Just that sometimes when we're close to a situation, we don't see how it appears to others. You and Nathan spent a lot of time together, talked frequently, traveled for work. Someone looking for problems might have misinterpreted that closeness. So now you think I did something wrong? I think you got caught up in an intense working relationship and maybe didn't realize how it looked to outsiders. That's not the same as doing something wrong. She studied my face, searching for judgment or suspicion. I kept my expression neutral, supportive, but not naive. You believe me, don't you? She asked. About Nathan and me being just colleagues? I took her hand in both of mine, meeting her eyes directly. I believe you care about your career and wouldn't intentionally jeopardize it for anything. It wasn't exactly the answer she wanted, but it was true enough to satisfy her immediate need for reassurance. I need a shower, she said, standing up. This whole day feels like a nightmare. While she was upstairs, I retrieved my briefcase from the hall closet and removed a manila folder I'd prepared weeks ago. Inside was a copy of her termination letter, obtained through a contact in MedTech's legal department. The document was dated Friday, 3 days before the wedding, 2 days before she'd been notified. I'd been carrying it around since Saturday morning, waiting for the right moment. When she came back downstairs in her bathrobe, hair damp and face scrubbed clean, she looked younger and more vulnerable than she had in years. Feel better? I asked. A little. At least I'm clean. She curled up next to me on the couch. David, I'm scared. What if I can't find another job? What if this follows me everywhere? We'll figure it out, I said, one step at a time. I keep thinking about who could have done this. Who had access to my personal information? Who could have been watching us without us knowing? She shook her head. It feels so violating. Maybe it was someone closer than you think. What do you mean? I opened the briefcase and handed her the termination letter. I mean someone who knew exactly when and how to strike for maximum impact. She unfolded the document, frowning as she read. I watched her face change as she processed the date stamp, the detailed allegations, the comprehensive nature of the evidence cited. This is dated Friday, she said slowly, but they didn't fire me until Monday. That's right. Someone filed this complaint before the weekend, before I even went to the conference. Her voice was barely a whisper. Someone knew exactly what I was planning to do. Someone who'd been watching you for months. Someone who documented every text message, every dinner, every hotel reservation. Someone who knew your patterns well enough to predict your next move. She looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment when all the pieces clicked into place. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, disbelief, and finally, a kind of hollow recognition. It was you, she said. It wasn't a question. It was me. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 22 years settling between us like a stone wall. Outside, a car drove past on Granite Street, its headlights briefly illuminating our living room before disappearing into the night. How long have you known? She asked. Since March. Maybe earlier, if I'm being honest with myself. You started changing last fall, staying late more often, being secretive about your phone, talking about Nathan constantly. At first, I thought it was just work stress. But you investigated me, like I was a criminal. I documented what I observed, the same way I'd document any other operational problem that needed solving. Her laugh was bitter and sharp. Operational problem. Is that what our marriage was to you? Our marriage was everything to me, right up until you decided it wasn't enough for you. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. So you destroyed my career instead of talking to me, instead of giving me a chance to explain. Explain what? That you fell in love with your boss? That you've been lying to me for months? That you were planning to spend this weekend in a hotel room with him while I sat at home believing your conference story? It wasn't... She stopped herself, finally realizing that denial was pointless. It wasn't supposed to happen. Nathan and I, we connected. The project was so intense, and we were spending so much time together, and you were always busy with your own work. So it's my fault. That's not what I meant. She sat back down, but farther away this time, on the opposite end of the couch. I meant that we grew apart. Both of us. We stopped talking, stopped making time for each other. When Nathan and I started getting close, it felt like something I'd forgotten I was missing. And rather than work on our marriage, you decided to work on him. It wasn't that calculated. Feelings just developed. We tried to keep things professional, but the attraction was too strong. Finally, some honesty. It felt like a small victory, though a hollow one. When were you planning to tell me? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe after the project was finished and Nathan and I figured out what we wanted long term. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. I know how that sounds, selfish and cowardly, but I didn't want to hurt you unless I was sure about what I wanted. So you were going to keep me as a backup plan while you explored your options? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You wanted to have your stable marriage and your exciting affair until you decided which one offered you more. She couldn't argue with that assessment, so she didn't try. Instead, she asked, "What happens now?" I looked around our living room, the furniture we'd chosen together, the photos from vacations and holidays, the accumulated evidence of 2 decades of shared life. Tomorrow, she'd start making phone calls about lawyers and job searches and damage control. She'd probably move in with her sister or find a temporary apartment. We'd divide assets and argue about custody of our grown daughter and pretend to be civil while we dismantled everything we'd built together. But tonight, for just a few more hours, we were still married people sitting in our living room, talking about the end of our world. Now you know what it feels like to have someone you trust completely betray you, I said. The only difference is, I used the truth. The next 3 weeks passed like a slow-motion car accident. Erica moved out on a Tuesday, taking 2 suitcases and a wounded dignity that filled every room she entered. She found a furnished apartment across town, one of those sterile corporate housing units that rent by the month to people whose lives have temporarily exploded. I helped her carry boxes to her car, both of us maintaining the careful politeness of strangers sharing an elevator. She took her clothes, her books, her collection of hospital administration awards, and half the wedding china we'd never used. She left behind 22 years of photographs and the coffee maker I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. I'll call you about the lawyer meetings, she said, standing in the doorway with her final box. Sure, I'll be here. She hesitated, as if there was something else she wanted to say, then simply nodded and walked away. I watched her drive off from the living room window, noting that she turned left toward downtown instead of right toward her sister's house. Old habits of observation, hard to break. The house felt strange without her constant motion and chatter. Erica had always been a presence that filled spaces, humming while she cooked, talking on the phone while she folded laundry, playing music while she worked in her home office. The silence that replaced her was profound and unsettling. I threw myself into work with the dedication of a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. The hospital's operations department had been struggling with supply chain issues all year, and I attacked the problems with methodical precision. Reorganizing inventory systems, renegotiating vendor contracts, streamlining procurement processes. My colleagues seemed relieved to have me fully engaged again after months of distracted performance. You're like a man possessed, my assistant Carol observed, watching me reorganize the entire filing system for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. Everything okay at home? Erica and I are separated, I said, not looking up from the budget spreadsheets I was cross-referencing. Divorce proceedings will probably start soon. Carol made appropriate sympathetic noises, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. Hospital gossip traveled faster than antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and my wife's dramatic termination from medtech had already become legend. Everyone knew the official story. Inappropriate workplace relationship, policy violations, immediate termination. What they didn't know was how the evidence had been obtained or who had filed the complaint. I intended to keep it that way. My daughter Samantha called on Thursday evening, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Dad, what the hell happened with Mom's job? Sam was 28, married to a decent guy named Jake, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm downtown. She'd inherited her mother's intensity and her grandmother's stubborn streak, which made her formidable when she felt someone had been wronged. Your mother violated company policy, I said, settling into my recliner with a beer. She was terminated for cause. That's corporate speak. I want to know what really happened. She had an affair with her boss. Someone reported it to HR with documentation. The company fired both of them. Silence stretched across the phone line. Sam was processing, probably trying to reconcile the mother she knew with the woman who'd risk her career for a workplace romance. Who reported it? She finally asked. Does it matter? The evidence was solid. Text messages, financial records, travel documentation. Your mother doesn't deny the relationship happened. It matters because someone destroyed her life. Mom's worked 20 years to build her career, and now she can't even get interviews. Word has gotten around the healthcare community. She's basically blacklisted. Actions have consequences, Sam. Your mother made choices that violated her employment agreement. She knew the risks. You sound like you're glad this happened. I considered that assessment. Was I glad? Satisfied, certainly. Vindicated, absolutely. But glad seemed too simple for the complex mix of emotions I'd been carrying since the wedding. I'm not glad your mother is suffering, I said carefully. But I'm not sorry she's facing the consequences of her decisions. That's cold, even for you. What would you prefer? That I pretend to be devastated by her betrayal? That I play the role of shocked, innocent husband who never saw it coming? I'd prefer you show some compassion for the woman you were married to for over 20 years. I showed her 22 years of compassion, Sam. I supported her career, encouraged her ambitions, trusted her completely. She repaid that by lying to my face while she carried on with her boss. Another long pause. When Sam spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less determined. I'm not defending what Mom did. If she really was having an affair, that was wrong. But Dad, someone stalked her. Someone invaded her privacy and documented her personal life like she was a criminal. That's not justice. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Are you saying you did this? You reported Mom to her company? The direct question hung in the air between us. I could lie, maintain plausible deniability, let her believe it was some anonymous whistleblower or corporate enemy, but Sam was smart, and she knew me well enough to recognize evasion. I'm saying your mother's choices had predictable consequences. Someone was bound to notice eventually. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my empty house, drinking beer and listening to the October wind rattle the windows, wondering if I'd just lost my daughter along with my wife. The divorce papers arrived the following Monday, delivered by a courier who looked embarrassed to be involved in someone else's domestic drama. Erica was asking for half of everything: the house, the retirement accounts, the savings we'd accumulated over 2 decades of shared financial goals. She wanted alimony based on her previous salary, despite being terminated for cause. She wanted me to pay her legal fees. I called my own lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in complex divorces. She's asking for a lot, Patricia observed, reviewing the documents. Given the circumstances of her termination, she's not in a strong negotiating position. What do you mean? Adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. If we can prove the affair, it affects property division and spousal support. Courts don't look favorably on spouses who violate marital vows and then demand financial compensation. How would we prove the affair? Patricia smiled. The same evidence that got her fired would work in divorce court. Text messages, financial records, witness testimony. If someone were to provide that documentation, it would significantly strengthen your position. I pretended to consider this suggestion, as if the idea of using evidence against my wife was occurring to me for the first time. That seems harsh, I said. Even if she made mistakes, she's still the mother of my daughter. I don't want to destroy her completely. Admirable sentiment, but she's asking for half your assets and permanent alimony. If you're feeling generous, that generosity could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the long term. I told Patricia I'd think about it and get back to her. In truth, I'd already made my decision weeks ago. The evidence was compiled, organized, and ready for legal proceedings. But I wanted Erica to believe she still had some control over the situation, right up until the moment she discovered otherwise. That moment came sooner than expected. I was working late on a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Nathan. Interesting. I'd wondered when Erica's former lover would make contact. I'd been expecting anger, threats, maybe an attempt at negotiation. What I got was a meeting request. I texted back, when and where. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Murphy's Tavern on State Street. Come alone. Murphy's was a dive bar in the Warehouse District, the kind of place where conversations stayed private and nobody asked questions about why 2 men were drinking together on a Friday night. I arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a corner booth where I could watch the door. Nathan Wallace looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. His expensive haircut was growing out, his usually perfect stubble had become an actual beard, and his clothes were casual in a way that suggested he'd stopped caring about professional appearances. He spotted me immediately and walked over with the careful gait of someone who'd already had a few drinks. David Thompson, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks for coming. Nathan, you look like hell. Feel like it too. He signaled the bartender for another whiskey. Lost my job, lost my apartment, lost my girlfriend. Been a real banner month. Sorry to hear that. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Are you? Sorry, I mean, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you got exactly what you wanted. I sipped my beer and studied his face. Nathan was younger than me by almost a decade, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never having experienced real failure. The termination had clearly shaken him more than he'd expected. What did I want, Nathan? Revenge, payback, whatever you want to call it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I know it was you who reported us. Had to be. Nobody else had access to the kind of detailed information HR received. That's an interesting theory? It's not a theory. It's a fact. The question is what you want now. What do you mean? I mean, are you satisfied with destroying our careers, or is this just the opening move? He took a long pull from his whiskey. Because if you're planning to keep going, I'd rather know now. I considered his question seriously. What did I want from Nathan Wallace? He'd lost his job, his reputation, his future in the industry. Erica had made it clear their relationship was over. Hard to maintain a romance when both parties were unemployed and facing potential legal action. He was already paying the price for his choices. But he'd also taken something from me that could never be returned. 22 years of trust, of believing I was married to someone who valued our vows as much as I did. He'd helped her lie to me, helped her plan deceptions, helped her construct a fantasy where she could have both her stable marriage and her exciting affair. Tell me about the affair, I said. What? I want to know how it started, how long it went on, what you two talked about when you were planning your future together. Nathan's face went pale. I'm not going to give you details to use against Erica in divorce court. I already have all the evidence I need for divorce court. This is personal curiosity. Why would you want to torture yourself with that information? Because I spent months living with a woman who was lying to me every day. I want to understand how completely I was fooled. He stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to decide if I was serious or setting some kind of trap. Finally, he shrugged. It started last spring, March, maybe early April. We were working late on the hospital integration project, and we just connected. Started talking about things beyond work. Our backgrounds, our goals, our frustrations with our personal lives. What frustrations? She said you two had grown apart, that you were focused on your own career and didn't seem interested in her achievements. She felt like you were roommates more than husband and wife. I nodded. Erica had mentioned similar complaints during our final conversation. Interesting how she'd been sharing marital problems with Nathan before their relationship became physical. When did it become romantic? May, I think. We went to dinner after a particularly long day, and the conversation got personal. She talked about feeling invisible in her marriage, like she was just part of the furniture. I told her she deserved better. And you were willing to provide better. I was attracted to her. She's intelligent, ambitious, beautiful, and she seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just as her boss or a career opportunity. When did you start sleeping together? Nathan flinched at the direct question. That's not something I'm going to discuss. Fair enough. What about the future? Were you two planning to leave your spouses and build a life together? We talked about it, hypothetically. Erica said she needed time to figure out what she really wanted. She didn't want to blow up her marriage unless she was sure about us. So I was the backup plan. It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. She wanted to test drive her new relationship while keeping her old one in reserve. Classic have your cake and eat it too scenario. Nathan finished his whiskey and signaled for another. Look, I'm not proud of how things developed. I should have been more professional. Should have insisted we deal with our feelings appropriately. But David, I wasn't trying to destroy your marriage. I was just falling for someone who seemed to be falling for me. And now? Now I realize I was an idiot. Erica's made it clear that our relationship is over. Can't maintain a romance when both parties are unemployed and facing potential lawsuits. She's focused on survival now, not love. I almost felt sorry for him. Nathan had genuinely believed he was part of a great romance, the other man in a love triangle who would eventually win the girl. Instead, he'd discovered he was just a midlife crisis with a resume. What do you want from me, Nathan? I want you to call off the dogs. Stop whatever investigation you're running. Stop feeding information to lawyers and HR departments. Let us try to rebuild our lives without looking over our shoulders. I'm not running any investigation. Bullshit. Someone's been asking questions about me at my old company, calling references, digging into my background. My lawyer says it looks like someone's building a case for a civil suit. This was news to me. I hadn't authorized any private investigators or background checks beyond what I'd needed for the divorce proceedings. Someone else was digging into Nathan's life. It's not me, I said honestly. Maybe Erica hired someone to investigate you, or maybe MedTech is doing due diligence to protect themselves from wrongful termination lawsuits. Or maybe you're lying. I shrugged. Believe what you want, but I'm not the only person who might have reasons to investigate you. Nathan studied my face, trying to read whether I was telling the truth. After a moment, he seemed to accept that I wasn't behind whatever investigation he was worried about. What happens now? He asked. Between you and Erica, I mean. We get divorced. She moves on with her life, I move on with mine. Pretty standard procedure. Are you going to destroy her in court? Use the affair to take everything? I considered the question. Erica had betrayed me, lied to me, planned to continue lying to me indefinitely. She'd shown no remorse beyond regret at getting caught. She was demanding half our assets and permanent financial support despite being terminated for cause. But she was also the mother of my daughter, the woman I'd loved for over 2 decades, the person I'd planned to grow old with before she decided she wanted something different. I'm going to protect my interests, I said finally. Beyond that, we'll see how reasonable she wants to be. Nathan nodded, apparently accepting that as the best answer he was likely to get. He finished his drink and stood up. For what it's worth, he said, I never intended for things to go as far as they did. I'm sorry you got hurt. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. He couldn't argue with that assessment, so he didn't try. He left me sitting in the booth with my beer and my thoughts, wondering who else was investigating Nathan Wallace and why. I didn't have to wonder long. The answer came in the form of a phone call Saturday morning from my daughter. Dad, we need to talk. In person? Can you meet me for lunch? Sam's voice carried an urgency that made me pay attention. We met at a diner downtown, one of those retro places that served oversized portions and strong coffee. She was already waiting when I arrived, looking like she hadn't slept much. You look tired, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. I've been doing research about Mom's situation, about what happened at MedTech, about who might have reported the affair. She leaned forward, fixing me with the direct stare she'd inherited from her grandmother. I hired a private investigator. Sam, don't. Just listen. She pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between us. I wanted to find out who destroyed Mom's career. I thought maybe it was someone at the hospital, or a rival at MedTech, or Nathan's ex-girlfriend, someone with a grudge and access to information. I waited, knowing where this was heading, but curious to see how much she'd discovered. The investigator traced the HR complaint back to its source. The call was made from a cell phone registered to David Thompson. The evidence was uploaded from an IP address that traces back to our house on Granite Street. The timestamps matched the evening of Uncle Peter's wedding. She opened the folder and spread out printed documents, phone records, IP logs, a detailed timeline of the complaint and evidence submission. It was you, Dad. You destroyed Mom's career. You've been planning this for months. I looked at the evidence she'd compiled, impressed despite myself by her thoroughness. The private investigator had done good work, following digital breadcrumbs I'd never thought to cover. Yes, I said simply. It was me. Sam sat back as if I'd slapped her. She'd been hoping I would deny it, or at least show some remorse for what I'd done. Why? She asked. Why not just confront her? Why not try counseling or separation or any of the normal things people do when marriages are in trouble? Because she wasn't going to stop. The affair wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a sustained deception that lasted months. She was planning to continue it indefinitely while keeping me as her safety net. So you decided to destroy her life instead of just ending your marriage. I decided to document the truth and let her face the consequences of her choices. She violated her employment agreement, misused company resources, and lied to her husband. Those actions had natural consequences. Natural consequences? Sam's voice rose, drawing looks from other diners. You stalked her, Dad. You invaded her privacy, documented her personal life, and then used that information to destroy her career. That's not natural consequences. That's calculated revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in her eyes. The last remnant of the little girl who'd thought her father was a hero, who'd believed I was incapable of deliberate cruelty. I don't know who you are anymore, she said quietly. I'm the same person I've always been. The only difference is that now you know what I'm capable of when someone betrays me. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Your mother spent 22 years married to me without ever really understanding who I was. She saw what she wanted to see, the steady, reliable husband who would always be there no matter how she treated him. She was wrong. Sam gathered up her documents and stuffed them back into the folder. Mom was right about one thing. You two did grow apart. But it wasn't because you were too focused on work. It was because you're cold, Dad. Calculating and cold and apparently capable of destroying someone you claim to love. I did love her. That's why her betrayal mattered. If you loved her, you would have fought for your marriage instead of fighting to destroy hers. She stood up and threw a 20 on the table. I'm done with this conversation, and I'm done with you. Sam, wait. No, I've heard enough. She paused at the edge of the booth, looking down at me with a mixture of disgust and pity. I hope your revenge was worth it, Dad, because it cost you everything else. She walked away, leaving me alone with the check and the growing realization that my victory might have been more expensive than I'd calculated. 3 months after the wedding, I was living in a house that felt like a museum of my former life. The divorce proceedings had settled into a grinding routine of lawyer meetings, document exchanges, and carefully worded settlement offers that neither side found acceptable. Erica wanted half of everything plus alimony. I was offering a modest property split and limited spousal support based on her reduced earning capacity. The stalemate was costing us both a fortune in legal fees, but neither of us seemed willing to blink first. My relationship with Sam remained frozen in mutual disappointment. Now she'd stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped responding to my texts beyond brief acknowledgments that she was alive and well. Her silence was more painful than Erica's betrayal had been. I'd expected my wife to eventually disappoint me, but I'd never imagined losing my daughter in the process. Work became my refuge and my obsession. I threw myself into hospital operations with the intensity of a man trying to prove his worth through spreadsheets and efficiency reports. My colleagues seemed grateful for my renewed focus, even if they found my methods somewhat ruthless. You've reorganized the entire supply chain 3 times this quarter, Carol observed, watching me review vendor contracts with a magnifying glass. At some point, you're going to run out of systems to optimize. There's always room for improvement, I said, making notes about delivery schedules and bulk pricing discounts. Inefficiency is just another word for accepting mediocrity. Is this about the divorce? Because everyone understands if you need some time to process everything that's happened. I looked up from my paperwork to find Carol watching me with genuine concern. She'd been my assistant for 8 years, long enough to know that my current level of intensity wasn't entirely normal. The divorce is proceeding according to schedule, I said. My personal life isn't affecting my professional performance. Your professional performance has been exceptional. That's what worries people. You're working 12-hour days, reorganizing departments that didn't need reorganizing, and implementing new procedures faster than staff can adapt to them. Sounds like effective leadership to me. It sounds like someone who's trying to control everything around him because he can't control what matters most. Carol had always been direct, but this level of psychological analysis was new territory for our working relationship. I set down my pen and gave her my full attention. What exactly are you trying to say? I'm saying that maybe you should talk to someone, a counselor, a therapist, someone who can help you process what you're going through. Divorce is traumatic, even when it's necessary. I'm processing things just fine. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to micromanage your way out of grief. Grief. The word hit me unexpectedly hard. I hadn't thought of my emotional state in terms of grief, but Carol's observation had an uncomfortable ring of truth. I was mourning the loss of my marriage, my family, my vision of the future. The fact that I'd orchestrated some of those losses didn't make them less painful. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm handling things in my own way. By working 18-hour days and reorganizing filing systems that were already perfectly organized, by staying focused on what I can control and doing my job to the best of my ability. Carol nodded, but I could see she wasn't convinced. Just remember that you have people who care about you, David. You don't have to go through this alone. After she left, I sat in my office staring at vendor contracts and thinking about grief. Was that what this was? The methodical destruction of my wife's career, the careful documentation of her betrayal, the strategic maneuvering in divorce court? Was all of that just an elaborate form of mourning? Or was it something darker and more deliberate? My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my divorce attorney. Erica's lawyer wants to schedule a settlement conference. Are you ready to negotiate seriously? I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. What's their latest offer? 60% of assets, 5 years alimony, shared custody of any future grandchildren. They're claiming emotional distress and career damage due to your campaign of harassment. Campaign of harassment. Interesting phrase. Technically accurate, I supposed, though I preferred to think of it as accountability enforcement. Counter with 40% assets, 2 years alimony, no restrictions on grandchildren contact. If they want to claim harassment, make them prove it in court. That's a hard line, David. Are you sure you want to risk a trial? I thought about that question seriously. A trial would mean public testimony, detailed examination of evidence, witnesses describing the affair and its aftermath. Erica's reputation would be destroyed beyond repair, but mine might suffer as well. The methodical nature of my evidence gathering could be portrayed as obsessive or vindictive. On the other hand, I had truth on my side. Every document, every screenshot, every timeline entry was accurate and verifiable. Erica had violated her marriage vows and her employment agreement. I'd simply documented those violations and allowed natural consequences to unfold. "I'm sure," I texted back. "Let them know we're prepared to go to trial if necessary." That evening, I drove to Murphy's Tavern for the first time since my meeting with Nathan. The place looked exactly the same. Dim lighting, scarred wooden tables, the kind of clientele that minded their own business. I claimed the same corner booth and ordered a beer, settling in to think about the next phase of my life. I was halfway through my drink when someone slid into the seat across from me. I looked up expecting to see Nathan again, but instead found myself facing a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, professionally dressed, with a kind of sharp intelligence that made me immediately wary. "David Thompson," she said. It wasn't a question. "Do we know each other?" "Melanie Rodriguez. I work in HR at the hospital." She extended her hand across the table. "We've met briefly at staff meetings, but I don't expect you to remember." I shook her hand, trying to place her in the context of hospital politics. The name was familiar, but I couldn't attach it to a specific face or role. "What can I do for you, Melanie?" "Actually, I think I can do something for you. I have information about your wife's situation that you might find interesting." "My soon-to-be ex-wife's situation is pretty well documented already." "Not all of it." Melanie signaled the bartender for a drink. "There are aspects of Erica's relationship with Nathan Wallace that didn't make it into the MedTech investigation. Details that might be relevant to your divorce proceedings." I studied her face, trying to read her motivations. Hospital HR directors didn't typically seek out terminated employees' husbands for drinks and conversation. She wanted something from me, or she was offering something she thought I needed. "What kind of details?" "The affair started earlier than anyone realized. March of last year, not this year. They've been involved for almost 2 full years, not just a few months." "How do you know that?" "Because I helped cover it up initially. Erica came to me when she first got involved with Nathan, worried about policy violations and potential conflicts of interest. I advised her on how to maintain professional boundaries while exploring personal feelings." "You advised her how to have an affair without getting caught." "I advised her how to handle a complicated situation professionally. At the time, I thought she was dealing with unwanted advances from a superior. I didn't realize she was an active participant in developing the relationship." Melanie's drink arrived, something clear with lime, probably gin. She took a careful sip before continuing. Over time, it became obvious that Erica was manipulating the situation to her advantage. She used the relationship to gain access to confidential information, to influence project decisions, to position herself for promotions she wasn't qualified for. So she was sleeping her way to the top. More accurately, she was using her relationship with Nathan to bypass normal professional channels. The hospital integration project was supposed to have multiple candidates for senior positions. Erica made sure she was Nathan's only recommendation. This was new information and potentially damaging in divorce court. If Erica had used the affair for professional advancement, it demonstrated a level of calculation that went beyond simple infidelity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you deserve to know the full scope of what your wife was doing, and because I think she should face appropriate consequences for manipulating the system." "What's in it for you?" Melanie smiled, and for the first time I saw something cold and calculating in her expression. "Erica threw me under the bus when the investigation started. She told MedTech that I knew about the affair and failed to report it properly. I'm facing disciplinary action because she needed someone to blame for her poor judgment." "So this is revenge." "This is justice. Erica made choices that hurt multiple people, then tried to shift responsibility when those choices caught up with her. She doesn't deserve protection from the consequences of her actions." I found myself nodding in agreement. Erica's pattern of avoiding responsibility was becoming clearer with each revelation. She'd blamed office politics for her termination, blamed our marriage problems for her affair, and now apparently blamed HR for not preventing her from making bad decisions. "What exactly are you offering?" "Documentation. Email threads showing Erica's requests for advice on handling her relationship with Nathan. Records of meetings where she discussed using her personal connection to influence professional decisions. Testimony about her attempts to manipulate the investigation after it started." "In exchange for what?" "Nothing. I'm not asking for payment or favors. I just want the truth to come out completely, not just the sanitized version that protects Erica's reputation." I studied Melanie's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. She seemed genuinely angry about being blamed for Erica's choices, and her offer of documentation could be valuable in divorce proceedings. How do I know this information is accurate? Because I kept detailed records of all our conversations. HR protocol requires documentation of any employee consultation regarding policy violations or ethical concerns. Everything I'm telling you is backed up by official records. And you're willing to testify in divorce court? If necessary, yes. Erica needs to understand that actions have consequences, and that includes the consequences of trying to destroy other people's careers to protect her own reputation. We talked for another hour, with Melanie providing details about Erica's manipulation of the hospital integration project and her attempts to use Nathan's influence for personal advancement. The picture that emerged was of someone far more calculating than the conflicted wife I'd thought I was married to. When Melanie left, she handed me a business card with her personal phone number written on the back. "Call me when you're ready to move forward," she said. "Erica's had months to control the narrative about what happened. It's time for the whole truth to come out." I sat alone in the booth for another hour, thinking about truth and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. Erica had betrayed our marriage, but she'd also betrayed her professional responsibilities and manipulated multiple people to advance her own interests. The affair was just one piece of a larger pattern of deception. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your daughter is worried about you. Maybe it's time to talk?" Jake. Jake was Sam's husband, a steady guy who usually stayed out of family drama. If he was reaching out, it meant Sam was more concerned about my behavior than she'd let on during our last conversation. I texted back, "I'm fine. Tell Sam she doesn't need to worry. She thinks you're planning something that will make everything worse. I'm planning to protect my interests in the divorce. Nothing more. Can we meet for coffee? Sam doesn't want to see you right now, but she's scared about what you might do next." I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "Tomorrow morning. Cafe Luna on State Street, 9 a.m. The next morning, I arrived at Cafe Luna to find Jake already waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a worried expression. He stood up when he saw me, and I was struck by how much older he looked than the last time we'd talked. The family drama was taking a toll on everyone. "Thanks for coming," he said, handing me one of the coffee cups. "How's Sam?" "Angry. Hurt. Confused about why her parents are destroying each other instead of just getting divorced like normal people." Jake sat back down and gestured for me to join him. "She's been crying herself to sleep most nights. I never wanted Sam to get hurt. But you knew she would be. When you decided to go after Erica's career, you had to know it would affect Sam too." I sipped my coffee and considered his point. Had I known Sam would be collateral damage in my war with Erica? Probably. Had I cared enough to modify my approach? Apparently not. "Erica made choices that hurt our family," I said. "I documented those choices and allowed natural consequences to unfold. Sam's pain is unfortunate, but it's a result of her mother's actions, not mine." "That's a convenient way to avoid responsibility for your own choices." "What would you have done, Jake? If you discovered Sam was having an affair, lying to you for months, planning to continue lying indefinitely, what would you have done?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, probably trying to imagine himself in my situation. "I'd have confronted her, demanded the truth, tried to understand why it happened and whether our marriage could be saved. And if she refused to end the affair, if she wanted to keep both you and her lover while she decided which relationship offered her more, I'd have filed for divorce and tried to move on with my life. Without ensuring she faced consequences for her deception? Without destroying her career and her reputation out of spite. It wasn't spite. It was accountability." Jake shook his head. "David, I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most methodical, strategic people I've ever met. When you decided to report Erica's affair to her company, you knew exactly what would happen to her career. You planned it that way." "So?" "So that makes it revenge, not accountability. You didn't just want Erica to face consequences. You wanted to control what those consequences were." I couldn't argue with that assessment, so I didn't try. Jake was right about my motivations, even if he didn't understand the justification for them. What does Sam want from me? She wants her father back, the man who taught her to ride a bike and helped her with homework and walked her down the aisle at her wedding. She doesn't recognize the person you've become. I'm the same person I've always been. The only difference is that now you all know what I'm capable of when someone betrays me. Is that supposed to be reassuring? I looked around the cafe at the other customers, couples sharing breakfast, business people checking their phones, college students studying over coffee. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. When had my life become so far removed from that kind of ordinary existence? Tell Sam I love her, I said finally. Tell her I never wanted her to get hurt, and I'm sorry she's caught in the middle of this. Tell her yourself. She'll listen if you're willing to apologize for what you've done. I'm not apologizing for holding Erica accountable for her choices. Then you're going to lose your daughter permanently. Is your need for revenge worth that price? I stood up, leaving my coffee mostly untouched. It's not revenge, Jake. It's justice. There's a difference. Not from where Sam's sitting. I walked away from the conversation feeling more isolated than I had since the whole mess started. Jake was wrong about my motivations. I wasn't seeking revenge for its own sake. I was ensuring that Erica faced appropriate consequences for her deception and betrayal. The fact that those consequences were severe didn't make them unjust. But his question about Sam lingered in my mind as I drove to work. Was my need for accountability worth losing my daughter? Was proving a point about consequences worth destroying what remained of my family? I didn't have good answers to those questions, and that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The rest of the week passed in a blur of routine activities. Work, lawyer meetings, solitary dinners in my empty house. I was reviewing supply chain reports on Friday afternoon when Carol knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's personal." "Who is it?" "Erica. She looks upset." I hadn't seen my soon-to-be ex-wife since she'd moved out 3 months earlier. The divorce proceedings had been handled entirely through lawyers, with no direct contact between us. Her decision to show up at my office suggested something had changed. "Send her in," I said, closing the supply chain reports and straightening my desk. Erica walked into my office looking like a woman who'd aged several years in a few months. Her hair was shorter and less carefully styled than I remembered. Her clothes were professional but not expensive, the kind of outfit someone wore when they were watching their budget carefully. She'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. "Hello, David." "Erica, this is unexpected." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where hospital staff came to discuss operational problems and budget concerns. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "We need to talk," she said. "About the divorce, about Sam, about what happens next. Our lawyers are handling the divorce negotiations. I don't think we should be discussing settlement terms directly. I'm not here about money or property division. I'm here because our daughter is falling apart, and we need to figure out how to help her. Sam is an adult. She'll work through her feelings about our divorce in her own time. She's not just upset about the divorce, David. She's terrified of you, of what you might do next. I'm not planning to do anything to Sam. She knows that, but she's watched you systematically destroy my life over the past few months, and she's wondering what you're capable of if someone else disappoints you." I leaned back in my chair, studying Erica's face. She looked genuinely worried about our daughter, which was the first time in months I'd seen her focus on anyone's welfare besides her own. "I've never given Sam any reason to fear me." "You've given her every reason to fear what you might do if she crosses you. She's afraid to maintain a relationship with me because she thinks you'll punish her for it. She's afraid to criticize your behavior because she thinks you'll retaliate somehow." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You spent months documenting my private life, then used that information to destroy my career. You're using the affair to demand a larger share of our assets in divorce court. You've turned our marriage into a war zone where the goal is total victory rather than fair resolution. I'm protecting my interests and ensuring you face consequences for your choices. That's not the same as waging war. From Sam's perspective, it looks like you're capable of destroying anyone who betrays you. She's wondering if she'll be next if she makes the wrong choice or says the wrong thing." I considered this possibility. Had my actions toward Erica created fear in Sam about her own relationship with me? It seemed possible, though I'd never intended to intimidate my daughter. "What do you want from me, Erica?" "I want you to stop. Stop digging for more evidence to use against me. Stop trying to maximize the financial damage from the divorce. Stop treating our failed marriage like a military campaign that needs to be won." "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for a clean divorce that doesn't destroy what's left of our family. I'll accept a reasonable property split and limited alimony. I'll stop fighting you on every point. We'll both move on with our lives without trying to destroy each other." "Define reasonable." 50-50 split of assets. 3 years of alimony based on my current earning capacity, not my previous salary. Joint custody of any future grandchildren, with no restrictions on contact. It was a better offer than her lawyers had been making, and significantly less than she'd originally demanded. The fact that she was willing to negotiate directly suggested she was more worried about my next moves than she'd let on. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you suddenly willing to be reasonable?" Because I'm tired of fighting. Because our daughter is suffering. Because I want to start rebuilding my life instead of constantly defending against your attacks. And because you're afraid of what other evidence I might have. She didn't deny it, which was answer enough. Erica was worried that I'd uncovered additional information that could damage her further. She wanted to settle before I had a chance to use whatever ammunition I might be holding in reserve. I'll consider your offer, I said, but I want something in return beyond just a reasonable settlement. What? I want the truth, complete honesty about the affair, about your motivations, about what you were planning for our future, no more lies, no more evasions, no more attempts to minimize what you did. What's the point of rehashing all of that? The point is that I spent months living with someone who was lying to me every day. I want to understand the scope of that deception before I agree to any settlement. Erica was quiet for a long moment, probably weighing the cost of complete honesty against the benefits of a quick resolution. Fine, she said finally. Ask me whatever you want to know. How long was the affair really going on? 18 months. It started in April of last year, not this past spring. Why did you start it? Because I was lonely. Because Nathan made me feel important and interesting in a way I hadn't felt in years. Because I convinced myself that what you didn't know wouldn't hurt you. Were you planning to leave me for him? Eventually, yes. We talked about it frequently. Nathan was going to divorce his wife, I was going to divorce you, and we were going to start fresh together. When? After the hospital integration project was completed. We wanted to establish our professional credentials independently before making our relationship public. So, I was a placeholder until you figured out the logistics of your new life. You were my husband, and I was trying to figure out how to end our marriage without destroying everything we'd built together. By lying to me for 18 months while you planned your exit strategy. By trying to minimize the damage to everyone involved. I almost laughed at that. Erica's idea of minimizing damage had involved systematic deception, professional manipulation, and emotional betrayal. But in her mind, she'd been protecting me from painful truths. What changed? Why didn't you follow through with the plan? Because we got caught. Because Nathan lost his job and decided he wasn't ready to blow up his marriage for an unemployed woman with a destroyed reputation. So he abandoned you when it became inconvenient to continue the relationship. He made a practical decision based on changed circumstances. I don't blame him for that. But you blame me for documenting your affair and reporting it to your company. I blame you for destroying my career instead of just confronting me about the relationship. Would you have ended it if I'd confronted you directly? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I found my answer. Erica would have promised to end the affair, then found ways to continue it more carefully. She would have become better at hiding her deception, not more honest about her feelings. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe, if you'd been willing to work on our marriage, to address the problems that led me to look elsewhere for connection. So it's still my fault that you had an affair? It's both our faults that our marriage deteriorated to the point where an affair seemed like an attractive option. I nodded, accepting her version of shared responsibility. It was probably the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I'll have my lawyer draw up settlement papers based on your offer, I said. 50-50 asset split, 3 years alimony, joint custody of future grandchildren. Thank you. She stood up, looking relieved. David, for what it's worth, I am sorry about how everything happened. I never wanted to hurt you or Sam. You just wanted what you wanted, and you were willing to lie to get it. Yes, she said simply. That's exactly what I did. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about truth and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. Erica had finally been honest about her motivations and her plans. She'd admitted to 18 months of systematic deception and acknowledged that she'd been planning to leave me all along. The affair hadn't been a mistake or a moment of weakness. It had been a calculated decision to pursue what she wanted while keeping me as a backup plan. She'd manipulated professional situations to advance her relationship with Nathan, then tried to shift blame when the consequences caught up with her. But she'd also offered a reasonable settlement and shown genuine concern for Sam's welfare. She seemed ready to move forward without further conflict, assuming I was willing to do the same. I called Patricia and asked her to draft settlement papers based on Erica's offer. It was time to end this phase of my life and figure out what came next. The war was over. The question now was whether I'd won anything worth having. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday morning in February, 8 months after my brother's wedding. Erica and I sat in a sterile conference room at the courthouse, signing documents that officially ended 22 years of marriage. She wore a navy blue suit I'd never seen before and avoided making eye contact throughout the proceedings. The settlement had gone exactly as negotiated. 50-50 asset split, 3 years of alimony, joint custody of any future grandchildren. My lawyer seemed pleased with the outcome, noting that the adultery evidence had given us significant leverage in negotiations. Erica's lawyer looked like a man who'd convinced his client to accept the best deal she was likely to get. When the judge declared our marriage officially dissolved, I felt nothing. No relief, no sadness, no sense of closure, just the hollow emptiness of a job completed without satisfaction. "That's it then," Erica said as we gathered our papers. "We're officially strangers again." "Not strangers. We'll always be Sam's parents. If she ever speaks to either of us again..." Sam had maintained her distance throughout the divorce proceedings, communicating with both of us through Jake when necessary but refusing direct contact. She'd made it clear that she held us both responsible for destroying our family, though she seemed to reserve special disappointment for my methods. "She'll come around," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Maybe. Or maybe we've damaged our relationship with her permanently." Erica paused at the courthouse steps, looking older and more fragile than I remembered. "Was it worth it, David? All the planning and documentation and legal maneuvering, did you get what you wanted?" I considered her question seriously. Had I gotten what I wanted? Erica had faced consequences for her deception. Lost her job, her reputation, her financial security. She'd been forced to acknowledge the full scope of her betrayal and accept responsibility for her choices. The divorce settlement protected my interests and ensured I wouldn't be financially penalized for her infidelity. But I'd also lost my daughter's respect, my marriage, and my vision of the future. The house on Granite Street felt like a mausoleum of failed dreams. My social circle had largely evaporated as friends chose sides or simply avoided the drama entirely. "I got accountability," I said finally. "Whether that was worth the cost remains to be seen." Erica nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for next." She walked away toward her modest apartment across town, and I drove home to my empty house, officially a divorced man for the first time in over 2 decades. The weeks that followed were surprisingly routine. Work continued to provide structure and purpose, though my colleagues seemed to treat me with a mixture of respect and wariness. I'd become known as someone who got results, but wasn't to be crossed lightly. "You seem different," Carol observed one afternoon as I reviewed quarterly budget reports. "More focused maybe, but also more distant." "Different how?" "Before your divorce, you were demanding but fair. People respected you because you held everyone to high standards, including yourself. Now..." She paused, searching for the right words. "Now it feels like you're always looking for problems to solve or people to correct. Like you're waiting for someone to make a mistake so you can fix it." "I'm maintaining operational standards." "You're micromanaging everything and everyone. Last week you reorganized the supply closet because the inventory sheets weren't alphabetized correctly. That's not maintaining standards. That's looking for control wherever you can find it." I set down my pen and gave Carol my full attention. She'd been working with me long enough to earn the right to honest feedback, even when it was uncomfortable to hear. "Are you saying I'm difficult to work with?" "I'm saying you're becoming the kind of boss people avoid instead of approach. Staff members are afraid to bring you problems because they're worried you'll blame them for creating the problems in the first place." "I hold people accountable for their responsibilities." "You hold people accountable for things that aren't their fault. When the pharmacy delayed a medication order last month, you wrote up the nurse who reported the delay. When the elevator broke down, you questioned whether maintenance had been following proper inspection protocols. You're looking for someone to blame for every inconvenience." Carol's observations were uncomfortably accurate. I had been more critical lately, more quick to find fault and assign responsibility. But wasn't that just effective management? Wasn't accountability important in a healthcare environment? "What would you suggest?" "Maybe take some time off. Go on vacation, visit family, do something that reminds you there's life beyond work and problems to solve." "I don't have family to visit. My wife left me, my daughter won't speak to me, and my brother thinks I'm too harsh in my personal relationships." "Then make new connections. Join a club, take a class, start dating. Find something that brings you joy instead of just satisfaction." Dating. The idea seemed both impossible and vaguely ridiculous. I was 51 years old, recently divorced, with a reputation for methodical revenge against people who betrayed me. What kind of woman would find that attractive? "I'll think about it," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. That evening, I sat in my living room with a beer and the local newspaper, scanning the community events section for activities that might qualify as making new connections. Book clubs, hiking groups, volunteer opportunities, adult education classes. All of it seemed designed for people who were naturally social, who enjoyed meeting strangers and making small talk about shared interests. I was considering a woodworking class when my phone rang. Sam's name on the caller ID made me sit up straighter. "Hello, Sam." "Hi, Dad." Her voice was cautious but not hostile. I heard the divorce was finalized. "Yesterday morning. It's official." "How do you feel about it?" "Relieved to have the legal proceedings finished, ready to move forward with the next phase of my life." "And what does that look like? The next phase, I mean." I looked around my empty house, thinking about Carol's suggestions and the community events section spread across my coffee table. I'm not sure yet. Work, probably some new hobbies, maybe travel. I haven't made specific plans. "Dad, can we talk? In person, I mean. There are things I need to say, and I'd rather do it face to face." "Of course. When and where?" "Tomorrow evening? That little Italian place on Elm Street where we used to go for your birthday?" "Rossini's." We'd celebrated probably a dozen birthdays there over the years, back when Sam was in high school and college. The choice of venue seemed deliberate, neutral territory with positive associations. 7 o'clock, I suggested. "Perfect. And Dad, thank you for taking my call." The next evening, I arrived at Rossini's 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table where we could talk privately. The restaurant looked exactly as I remembered: checkered tablecloths, wine bottles converted to candle holders, the smell of garlic and oregano filling the air. Sam arrived precisely on time, looking more like her old self than she had in months. She'd gained back some weight, her hair was styled carefully, and she was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. "You look good," I said as she sat down. "Thanks. So do you, actually. I was worried you might be falling apart after everything that happened." "I'm managing fine. Work keeps me busy, and I'm considering some new activities." "Like what?" "Maybe a woodworking class. Carol thinks I need hobbies that don't involve spreadsheets and operational efficiency." Sam smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Carol's probably right. You've always been happiest when you're building something with your hands." We ordered dinner and made small talk about her job, Jake's recent promotion, the unusually harsh winter weather. The conversation felt almost normal, like we were rebuilding the foundation of our relationship one careful exchange at a time. After the main course arrived, Sam's expression became more serious. "Dad, I need to apologize for some things I said during the divorce. I was angry and hurt, and I blamed you for destroying our family." "You had every right to be angry." "Maybe, but I wasn't being fair about the situation. I spent months thinking about what happened, about Mom's affair and your response to it, about what I would have done in your position." "What conclusion did you reach?" "That Mom betrayed you in the worst possible way, and you had every right to be furious about it. The affair was bad enough, but the lying and manipulation made it so much worse." I nodded, grateful for her understanding even if it came months too late. "But Dad, the way you handled it scared me. Not just the evidence gathering and the HR complaint, but the calculated nature of it all. You didn't just want Mom to face consequences, you wanted to control exactly what those consequences were." "I wanted to ensure she couldn't avoid accountability by lying or shifting blame." "I understand that now, but at the time, it felt like you were capable of destroying anyone who disappointed you. I was afraid to maintain a relationship with Mom because I thought you might punish me for it." "I would never punish you for loving your mother." "I know that intellectually, but emotionally, I was scared of what you might do if I made the wrong choice." We ate in silence for a few minutes while I processed her words. Sam had been afraid of me, not physically, but afraid of my capacity for methodical retaliation. The realization was more painful than I'd expected. "I never wanted you to be afraid of me," I said finally. "I know, and I'm sorry I let that fear keep me away for so long. You're my dad, and I love you, and I should have been there to support you through the worst period of your life." "You were protecting yourself. That was probably smart." "Maybe, but it wasn't fair to you. You were dealing with the collapse of your marriage and the loss of your family, and instead of helping you through it, I abandoned you when you needed me most." "Sam, you don't owe me." "Yes, I do. I owe you the same loyalty and support you've always shown me. Even when you were going through hell with Mom, you never stopped being my father. You never took your anger out on me or made me choose sides. Because you weren't responsible for your mother's choices. And you weren't responsible for becoming someone I didn't recognize when your whole world fell apart." We finished dinner and ordered dessert, the conversation gradually shifting to lighter topics. Sam told me about her latest design projects, her plans for redecorating their apartment, Jake's attempts to learn guitar, normal family conversation that felt like a gift after months of silence. As we prepared to leave, Sam reached across the table and took my hand. "Dad, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay." "Are you happy?" With how everything turned out? With the choices you made? With where you are now? I considered her question carefully. Was I happy? I'd achieved my goals regarding Erica. She'd faced consequences for her deception and acknowledged the full scope of her betrayal. The divorce settlement protected my interests and ensured I wouldn't be financially penalized for her infidelity. But I was also alone in a way I'd never been before. My marriage was over, my social circle had largely disappeared, and my colleagues treated me with wary respect rather than genuine affection. I'd become known as someone who got results, but wasn't to be crossed. I'm satisfied with the outcome, I said carefully. Whether that's the same as being happy, I'm not sure. What would make you happy? I don't know. I spent so much time focused on ensuring Erica faced consequences that I never thought about what I wanted for myself afterward. Maybe that's where you should start, figuring out what you want your life to look like now that you've closed this chapter. We hugged goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, and Sam promised to call more regularly. As I drove home, I thought about her question. What did I want my life to look like? For 22 years, I'd defined myself in relation to Erica, as her husband, her supporter, her partner in building a shared future. For the past year, I'd defined myself in opposition to her, as her victim, her prosecutor, her judge and jury. Now, for the first time in decades, I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't defined by my relationship to someone else. The house on Granite Street felt different when I walked in that night. Less like a museum of failed dreams, and more like a blank canvas waiting for new possibilities. I made a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down potential goals and interests. Travel to places Erica had never wanted to visit. Learn woodworking or photography or another hands-on skill. Volunteer for causes I cared about. Maybe even consider dating, though that still seemed premature. The list was short and tentative, but it was a beginning. For the first time since my brother's wedding, I was thinking about what I wanted to build rather than what I wanted to tear down. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Thank you for dinner. I love you, Dad. I texted back, I love you too. Thank you for giving me another chance. As I prepared for bed, I realized that Carol had been right about needing something that brought joy rather than just satisfaction. The evening with Sam had reminded me what that felt like, the warmth of unconditional love, the comfort of being accepted despite my flaws, the hope that damaged relationships could be repaired with patience and effort. Maybe that was enough to start with. Maybe joy was something you built one small connection at a time, rather than something you achieved through grand gestures or perfect outcomes. I fell asleep that night thinking about woodworking classes and weekend trips and phone calls with my daughter, small possibilities that felt larger than any victory I'd won in divorce court. The war with Erica was over, and I'd gotten what I'd fought for. Now it was time to figure out what I wanted to fight for next, and whether I could learn to build instead of just tear down. Outside my bedroom window, Granite Street was quiet except for the sound of wind through bare trees and the distant hum of late-night traffic. Spring was still months away, but for the first time in a year, I was looking forward to what it might bring.